Welcome to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, founder of the Motherhood Circle and creator of the Journey into Motherhood program. I'm a mother of two and have had two unplanned and unneeded C-sections and am planning my first home and vaginal birth. My own journey has sparked a deep passion to support women to find their own voice and strength to create the pregnancy, birth and motherhood experience you desire. This podcast is for women wanting to learn more about VBACs, especially home births, and for professionals who want to learn more about how to support VBAC home birthing women. Inside, we're going to share women's stories from surgical birth to achieving their vaginal home birth after cesarean. Now let's get started. Hey, me again. I just wanted to let you know that I've just created a brand new Facebook group called VBAC Homebirth Support Group, where you can connect with other like-minded mothers who are looking to have a VBAC home birth as well. You can find the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there. Hi, Maddie. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today. I'm really excited, as I said to you before, for having you on and sharing your VBAC freebirth story, which is really exciting. So please let the listeners know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name's Maddie and I live in regional Victoria. I am now a mum of two. My first baby was a C-section due to breech presentation. And my second little boy, who came into the world 4 weeks ago, was free birth at home in the shower.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on so soon into your postpartum as well. And congratulations. I don't say this to anyone, and I should start saying congratulations, because this is a special moment in time for you. And you've just, birthed your second baby, which is such an amazing milestone and memory.
Yeah, the bubble of postpartum is very full on. So I kind of thought to myself, yeah, I'll get it done soon so that I remember it all. But at the same time, I was like, I'm just in this bubble of up and down emotional roller coaster. So I'm actually glad to be talking about it all.
Oh, glad. I'm so happy to have you share your stories, which are raw and real and authentic. So, let's be gentle with sharing these stories. So we'll start off today with your first pregnancy and your first birth, if you'd like to start sharing, please.
All right. So I think I should go a little bit before I fell pregnant, because our first, she was planned, and because she was planned and I had whitecoat syndrome, which is, a fear of medical professionals and doctors' clinics and things like that, I actually started to see a psychologist before I fell pregnant to help through all that sort of, I guess it was a weird trauma of hospitals. And so I started going into hospitals and medical centres with this psychologist to try and work through my fears, because my blood pressure would go through the roof and I'd get really dizzy and almost pass out because I became so fearful. So I'd started to do that, and I feel like it did help, but then throughout my pregnancy, I think the fear got worse again due to just the treatment I had. So then when I fell pregnant, I thought I'm going to see a female doctor, because I thought that, I'm a female as well, I'd probably feel more comfortable. And she was really, really nice. But then I went to my next appointment with her and she was gone because she went on maternity leave. And there was this male doctor there. And I tried to I didn't go to as many appointments as most people would, really because of my fear of going to appointments. And then when I started seeing this male doctor, and he was not nice at all, and it got to the point where he was so concerned about my weight gain, and I had quite bad morning sickness throughout for the first 26 weeks. I was very sick, and I found the way to stop from feeling so sick was to actually eat. And so I was putting on a bit more weight than I guess what the textbook would say is recommended. And I ended up sort of asking him how much weight should I be putting on, because I started to get really anxious about it. And he turned around to me and said, look at it this way. The fat cow never has a good birth. And from then I obviously went home and cried, and I did not go back and see him ever again.
That's helpful. I've never actually heard that that analogy. A fat cow.
I think because we live in a regional area where there's lots of dairy farmers, maybe.
But aren't cows like supposed to be nice and juicy?
Well, that's what I would think too. But when he said that, it was just one of those moments where I thought, oh my God, I need to try and like diet. So suddenly in my pregnancy, I'm thinking, well, all I eat is, because I was vegetarian as well. So, I was eating so much fruits and veggies and good food, but I just kept like putting on this weight. And
was he a GP? Sorry, I didn't know where you were getting your care from. So you were seeing a GP.
He was a GP.
Okay.
Yeah, and then obviously I left him. Didn't want to go back.
It's not helpful because he didn't actually explain to you, how much weight was recommended, and then talk to you about anything. He just shrugged it off and didn't actually want to engage in any healthcare. He just wanted to insult you.
Yeah,
which is not helpful.
It was horrible. And like as well, I was 19, so I'm 23 this year. So I had my first baby quite young, and I think that maybe the doctors that I did see sort of looked at me as naive and like I kind of didn't know what I was doing, perhaps.
Yeah, I've heard this story a lot with younger or teen mums. I have a lot of teen mums or younger mum friends myself. And it's a shame, this discrimination or lack of support or understanding that goes into, younger mums, because you would think that, a younger mum needs more support and, better understanding and more guidance and love, rather than being treated, as if they're stupid, because they're not.
Oh, exactly. And I feel like as well, quite a lot of the young mums, like from my experience as well with my younger mum friends, a lot of them actually seem to look into things so much more. Like maybe the slightly older generations, because they're so used to, I guess, the standard kind of hospital type settings and things, they don't seem to look into it as much, whereas the younger ones are the ones now questioning things, but we get treated completely different.
It's not fair.
Yeah, so that was that doctor. And then we move on to the third doctor, who was the last doctor that I saw in my pregnancy. And she was no better. She did not support any of my choices at all, and was extremely pressuring when it came to a lot of the routine tests and things, which I was questioning and declining at the time. And it got to the point where she kept pulling the dead baby card and said that if I don't do this, my baby might die, or your baby might get an infection, and all these kinds of things, even though I knew in myself and I knew from all the research that I was doing that not doing the glucose test wouldn't necessarily mean that my baby would die. So it was very, very full on with her as well, and I had a terrible relationship with her from the start. And because I wanted no intervention and to be allowed, I guess, unfortunately I have to use the word allowed, allowed to carry this baby and, have the pregnancy and the birth that I wanted, it just became really hard with such a textbook doctor. And then it must have been 30 weeks, I had a minor car accident. And no one was hurt, and we went to the hospital and baby was fine, in perfect position, and so we were just sort of getting monitored for a little bit, and then we got told we could go home. And that night my stomach was completely lopsided, and 3 days after that car accident I went and saw my midwife, and I found out that the baby was breech. So my midwife said that there was heaps of time for the baby to change positions, and she recommended the spinning babies exercises. And as part of the care at the clinic local to us, if you see the midwife at the end of it, the doctor comes in and kind of checks you over as well. And of course my doctor came in and she said, look, if the baby doesn't flip in the next few weeks, at 35 weeks, you are going to have a C-section. And as someone with whitecoat syndrome, that was the most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, and also he's knocked off at least 5 weeks off your pregnancy, because baby can still flip after that.
Yeah. So she was dead set on 35 weeks. And, you know, I went home crying, of course, as I do from the doctors. And, you know, was so stressed out because not only did I suddenly find out my baby was breech and that a C-section might be on the cards, but we were in the middle of moving house as well. So it was just so stressful from that moment. And so, you know, we moved house, and then we started to try even more of the options, I guess, available to try and flip breech babies. So we tried moxibustion sticks and acupuncture, and then the spinning babies exercises, and we did lots of meditation and talking to the baby, and we even did handstands in the pool on a daily basis to try and like get this baby to flip around, but she just wouldn't budge. And looking back on that now, I think that it's mainly because I was stressed, and because if I was a baby all safe in a womb, why would I want to come out into a world that was so stressful? So I think she didn't want to come out because it was just chaos outside at the moment. And then there was an ECV offered, which we were booked in for, but the day before we were meant to go in, I had this really bad like gut feeling. I'm sure you'd know the one that I'm talking about, that gut feeling where you know that something is going to go wrong. And so we ended up cancelling that, and I felt instant relief after cancelling. So I look back on that, and that was a good decision. But then because I did decline that, and because the baby was not flipping, I had to come to terms with the fact that I would be having a C-section. And so then at 34 weeks, I went in and I refused to have a C-section at 35 weeks. My midwife was really confused why the doctor was so set on 35 weeks, considering that is so early. And I feel like a lot of that may have had to do with the fact that my baby was due in December, and December's Christmas time, and the doctor was going away. And so I think that maybe the 35 weeks thing was before she was going away, so it was just easy to get it over and done with maybe.
That's so full on. I've had 2 December babies, and I've heard you know, all this doctors going away and that sort of thing, but I've never ever heard, and I'm sure it happens all the time, but I've never heard 35 weeks for a breech baby with no other medical issues or concerns.
Yeah, like I was
That's so early.
Like, I had no complications or anything. Like my pregnancy was so textbook, and 35 weeks. It was just completely insane, really. And then so at that 34-week appointment as well, the midwife confirmed that yes, the baby was still breech. And then at 36 weeks, I saw the midwife again, and she confirmed that it was breech. But then when the doctor came in at the very end of the appointment, she's like, oh no, the baby's flipped around, so you need to stop doing spinning babies exercises, otherwise she might flip. And so I went against my gut and I stopped doing them, which I actually felt like they were starting to maybe encourage a bit of movement. But because I got this confirmation from the doctor that baby was back in, you know, head down position, I stopped. And so then at my appointment the week after, the doctor's like, oh no, she's breech. And I had a feeling the midwife was correct in saying that she was breech that previous week, but I just didn't go with her. I went with the doctor instead. And so then, of course, it was okay, I have to have a C-section, and the C-section was booked, and it was just never-ending paperwork and appointments. Like, for someone with whitecoat syndrome, it was probably the worst few weeks of my life, really, because it felt like every second day I was in seeing another doctor or a surgeon, or, you know, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. The amount of people and appointments you have to see before a C-section is nothing like I would have ever expected.
I've never had a planned C-section, so both of my C-sections were
okay.
unplanned. One was due to a failed induction, but I can definitely relate to the anxiety that you're feeling going into the hospital and having these appointments, because I experienced that with my second, and it's really hard to explain it to people who don't understand the amount of anxiety that builds up, the adrenaline, the fear, the crying. It's just horrible.
Yeah, like basically every different person you see, you find out something really bad that could happen to you.
Is this although in the cesarean as well that they're telling you this about? Great.
Yeah, and of course, like, informed consent is really, really great, but I don't think it would hurt to focus on some of the positive sides of, you know, you get to meet your baby versus, oh, if this goes wrong, you might never have another baby again, or this could happen, or this could happen. And it just makes the anxiety and the fear about a C-section so much worse. So basically, those last few weeks of my first pregnancy, I would cry. I was constantly crying, and every single night I would just tell my baby that I don't want to meet them. And I feel so bad, like, even admitting that. But at the time, I did not want my baby to come out. I did not want to meet them because I knew that meant that I was going to be cut open. And obviously a lot of it would have to do with the whitecoat syndrome too, because I was just thinking of all these bad things that could happen, and all the doctors around me and all the white lights, and because I wanted this intervention-free birth, and I was thrown into the most medicalized birth that you could possibly have.
I can relate to that feeling. You know, I never wanted a C-section, so I don't know if I could, you know, plan a C-section. I think people who do plan C-sections are so brave, because that even though I've had 2 of them now, the idea of it, and it just scares the living daylights out of me, like the lights and the coldness, and, you know, the fact that you're getting cut open and that sort of thing's really, really scary to me. So I can relate to that.
Have you noticed the smell of hospitals?
No, I haven't. I
find the smell, I can still smell that hospital smell even today. It's something that is just completely stuck with me. And
this is obviously to do with your whitecoat syndrome situation as well. My grandma was afraid of hospitals, and so she refused to go to hospital with her second baby in home birth. But so, you know, I've always known that there's like this phobia around hospitals and going in and that sort of thing. But, you know, just to hear you explain it is just, it must have been so terrifying for you.
Oh, it was literally like I was living in a nightmare. Honestly, that's the only way I can describe it. If everyone could just think of the thing that they are the most scared of, it was like that, but sort of a 2.0 version. Like, I can't even describe the fear and how scared I was, really, because of just how full on it all was.
And how many weeks did you end up going? How many weeks were you when you ended up going in there to have your surgery?
So I was 39 weeks and 6 days.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So they listened to me, and I said that I would not be having the baby any earlier than 39 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And my midwife, she was very supportive of that too, and she did a lot of things to make it more comfortable for me. So she's also semi-retired, so she only works at the midwife clinic. She doesn't actually work on the ward at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But she actually specifically asked to be on the ward that day to be able to come with me into surgery and support me there. So
if it wasn't amazing.
If it wasn't for her, the experience would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, the day before the surgery, I saw the anaesthetist,
Mm-hmm.
and he explained how everything works and what's involved. And so he spoke about the spinal block and what that feels like, and he tried to describe the feeling of being numb and not being able to feel anything except sensation. So that was it was quite interesting to hear. Spinal block, then the catheter would go in so I didn't have to feel anything, and then I would be in the bed, and then it was, procedure happened. And so then, yeah, the day after that, it was the big day. And then in the theatre prep, your partner isn't allowed in with you. So I had to leave Ricky behind. So Ricky's my partner. And yeah, I had to leave him behind and go in basically on my own. The midwife, of course, was there. And yeah, like I said, she was amazing. But in the theatre, I basically got, I guess I'd describe it as diagnostically raped by the doctors, because I was feel anything. And I was lying there. I hadn't had the spinal block at this point, and I remember laying there on this big bed in one of those very unflattering bunless gowns that you have to walk around in the hospital in. And, I was so vulnerable and constantly in teary and trying so hard to just breathe. And then I suddenly hear my doctor say, "I'm putting the catheter in now." And before I could even say anything, she had pulled my legs apart and put the catheter in. And so I had to feel the entire thing of my legs being pulled apart and a catheter going in. And so that was something that had caused me to then end up with PTSD, and I was having flashbacks to that moment, because all I could see the white lights, the doctor there, and just felt my body be pulled apart and something in that I didn't really consent to at the time.
And you thought it was happening after, hey, from your appointment with the anesthesiologist?
Yeah, and it would have been fine if that all happened, because at least I'd know it was that way. But to have to feel that, it was absolutely horrible. And so then, of course, the procedure happened and everything went really, really well. But then when I was in recovery, holding my beautiful baby that I got to meet, I was on a little bit of a high as you can be after having a C-section. And my doctor came in and she goes, "Oh, you do realise you could have tried to deliver breech at the hospital an hour away." And I had never been told of my option to deliver breech at all throughout the entire thing.
Why did she say that to you then, after the fact?
I have no idea.
Ludicrous.
Yeah.
Besides trying to upset somebody, it's a weird thing to say to somebody.
Oh, it was absolutely horrible. And so, you already have the trauma of the stress from those last few weeks, trauma of what just happened in surgery, and then suddenly you find out that you could have tried to actually have a vaginal birth. So it was, from then it was just this huge cascade of PTSD. I ended up with intimacy issues with my partner, because every time he'd try and touch me, or even if a family member or friend went to hug me, I'd end up having a flashback to the doctor pulling my legs apart. So even the slightest touch, like if my partner touched my hand, suddenly my mind would just go into this flashback of that moment where that catheter went in. So I think I spent probably 6 months bottling all that up and not talking to anyone about it except my partner. But he didn't really, like, he was so supportive and beautiful, but he didn't fully understand what I went through, of course, because he wasn't me. And so he sort of had the same mindset that a lot of people have, which is that you have a healthy baby and that's all that matters, which that gets thrown around everywhere. But the reality is that if the mother isn't treated right and if she's having a hard time, then it makes it harder to actually look after that baby that you've just had.
And 1 in 3 women experience childbirth trauma in Australia, and 1 in 7 go on to experience PTSD, which I believe has a link and correlation to as well, which, you know, is not beneficial for mum or baby.
No.
And
I actually feel like those statistics are probably higher, but a lot of women stay silent about it, I think. I truly feel like it'd be a lot higher.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a fair point, because, you know, I've had many conversations with healthcare professionals and they've all said the same, but at least you had a healthy baby. And I say, well, that's great. Who's going to look after the baby?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's hard having, I guess, because when you have a baby, you lose your past identity too. And so you have to come to terms with the fact that you're a mum now and you also have this little human that you're responsible for. So there's already so much going on. And then I guess not having that care and love for yourself, because like in my case, I felt like it was my body's fault and that my body had let me down, even though the reality of it is that it wasn't my body's fault at all. And had I been more supported by my healthcare team, then things could have been the complete opposite way. And because breech, like, she was a frank breech as well, so that's actually the safest type of breech delivery to have, because her bum was down there, she wasn't foot lean or anything like that. So yeah, I just find it very, very hard. And then even now I feel really guilty for hating my body, because I kept blaming it all on my body. And then even if my daughter, like, she had a cold when she was like 6 months old, and for some reason I blamed that on the C-section. Like, every little thing that possibly went wrong I blamed on the C-section. And, you know, when you're researching about you know, babies who've had C-section, there's always these, oh, they're at a higher risk of asthma or a higher risk of getting sick. And so I think as well that mindset kicked in for me, and the smallest little thing that I guess at the time I was like went wrong, even though a cold isn't something that is wrong, it just happens. I was like, okay, well, that's because of the C-section, she hasn't got a good enough immune system. And then it was just this constant it was just constant
mother guilt.
Yeah, guilt.
I understand. I did a lot of that myself. I tortured myself. You have to torture yourself, you know, that's what you do. Mother guilt. I will never do that again, though, because it's not helpful for me or the baby. But, you know, we all go through these situations. I remember going to see Dr. Sarah Buckley, and she was talking about hormones, and she was talking about the best way that a baby can be born. And, you know, it's a spontaneous, natural labour where it's undisturbed, and, you know, the baby gets all the hormones and the mum gets all the hormones. And the room was filled with women probably planning their first birth. You know, there are a lot of pregnant women who are so excited about their birth, their home birth. And here was me sitting there, you know, wanting to learn more for my next baby, but I'd had 2 unplanned, unneeded cesareans. And I sat there and thought, well, we've stuffed that one up. You know, we've got 2 babies that have been born by cesarean. So there we go, and little tears were streaming down my eyes. And I thought, oh my God, I've ruined these children. But, you know, it's just, it doesn't mean that your child's going to end up sick or anything like that. But it's hard, you know, to not blame ourselves for everything, because, you know, we want the best for our children. We want the absolute best for them and to give them everything. And it means that we care so much about them as mums. And, you know, that means that we love them.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And like looking back on that now, I completely agree with everything you're saying. completely agree.
So you went through a lot of healing with before you fell pregnant with your next baby. You mentioned to me before that you had gone through a healing journey, and you started preparing for your next birth. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, okay. So I think I must have been almost a year postpartum when I finally went, nope, I need help. And I went and saw a spiritual counsellor, and she also she used to be a midwife, and she used to run the hospital that I also birthed at. So she actually knew all the doctors and all the people I was talking about. And because of her midwifery background as well, she was really, really helpful in, I guess, just telling me that my body was okay, because so many, like, I was still having, I got this, I think if it's a lot more mental than anything else, but my scar, every time I would think about my birth, or if I would see a baby down the street, my scar would start aching. Like, it would be absolutely just this horrible pain, like the worst period cramps I've ever had, only along my scar. And so my spiritual counselor came to this conclusion that maybe it's due to the fact that I am struggling to let go, and I'm not speaking my truth, and I'm holding on to all this past trauma and bottling it all up. So we decided together that we would write letters. So we wrote a letter to the hospital. It was almost like a letter of complaint, I suppose, about the treatment that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wrote a letter to my doctor as well, and left out absolutely no details. So yeah, I was seeing the spiritual counsellor, and we wrote letters. So there was a letter to the hospital, which was almost like a letter of complaint, I suppose. And then I wrote a really, really deep and, I guess, dark letter to the doctor that I'd seen, and I left out no details. I told her absolutely everything. I described the feeling of the catheter going in this letter. And then basically once I'd sent those letters off, I chose not to, the doctor tried to contact me after she got the letter. So she was sending letters to my dad's address, but I didn't know about that because my dad, he knew that I wouldn't want the letters, so he actually kept burning them. So that was what he was doing. And then she kept calling me. This time I was like, no, I have the power to make this choice, and I'm choosing not to respond to her, because I just felt like any apology that she would have wouldn't make up for what happened. So I just chose to let it go, and to hope that if anything, she would take on those letters. And so basically from there, I feel like I just started to speak my truth a lot more, which is what I was working on in these counselling sessions. So instead of bottling things up and hiding who I was, I guess I transformed into something completely different and a lot stronger from this experience. And so I started to feel really good, and I could look at the birth, and although, yeah, it's still something that I'll never properly get over, now at least I can look at it as, okay, that was an experience that I was meant to go through, and like, look at me now, like I'm so much stronger than what I was. And I think if I hadn't have had that experience to sort of push me over the edge, then I probably wouldn't be who I am today, because every experience that we go through is something that builds up our being and who we are, really.
Yeah, I agree. And now you're a beautiful butterfly.
Exactly. I went from a caterpillar to a butterfly.
Exactly. and then you went on to, did you consciously conceive your next baby?
Yeah, so she was 100% planned as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very wanted. And yeah, this time my pregnancy was completely different. With the first, yeah, I saw doctors and midwives a lot less than I guess your average person would.
Mm-hmm.
But this time I did not go to see anyone until I was 20 weeks. And from day one, I was dead set on a free birth. My friend Alice had actually had a free birth. It must have been 9 months prior to when I fell pregnant, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And hers was an emergency C-section that first time. And I think that maybe I think she said it was due to a failure to progress, even though she felt like the baby was about to come out.
Failure to wait, probably.
Yeah, that was probably the one. And so she had a beautiful free birth at home, and she told me all about it. And when we went to visit them, my partner spoke to her partner about it, because she just had a baby in the lounge room. And it was one of those things where it was like, wow, that's so crazy, but actually it makes a lot of sense. And so then when we fell pregnant, I was like, okay, I already make so many choices that people don't agree with or look at me as crazy. So, hey, what's free birthing and, just giving birth at home any different? And so then, 20 weeks came along, and I just had this feeling that I might be low in iron. And so I went to see the midwife. And again, this was the beautiful midwife that helped me out the first time. And I would only go and see her purely because she was a family friend and she was supportive of my choices. And anyway, it turned out that I was low in iron. So this time I was a lot more tuned into my intuition. And then, of course, because at that clinic, the doctor comes in at the end, a different doctor from the first time came in and tried to talk me into scans, which at the time, like, I was not planning on having any scans at all. But then I went home and spoke to my partner, and because he was a little bit anxious about a free birth, because I guess, all he was hearing about was uterine rupture and placenta being in a bad place and all that sort of thing. So we ended up getting a scan just of the placenta, and it was hard enough to try and convince the doctor and even the person who was doing the ultrasound to just scan the placenta. And we had to try and explain and justify all our reasons, and that was immediately where I was like, yeah, I'm not going into the hospital. And then I saw that midwife 3 more times during my pregnancy, but it was mainly just if I had questions about birthing at home. And because I'm actually an hour and a half away from the closest hospital that is VBAC friendly, I sort of, rather than admitting that, I'm having a free birth, to our midwife friend, because I didn't want to potentially put her career on the line, because I know that if they're aware of your choice and if something goes wrong, they can sometimes get blamed for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I never actually told her that I was going to free birth at home. And whenever I had questions, I said, so if I accidentally have the baby at home, and that was how I sort of got around it and found out answers I wanted without potentially putting her career on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And because the hospital was so far away, it was sort of plausible anyway. And basically throughout this pregnancy, I just felt so powerful and relaxed, and it just felt normal. I think the first time pregnancy was just, I guess as well, first pregnancy, it is all new to you, so things are sort of different and scary. But yeah, I felt so powerful and just calm about every single little thing. And so rather than worrying about my hospital bag and my birth plan for the hospital, I'm more focused on my mindset and researching all the different scenarios that could happen at home. So my partner and I looked into all the things that could possibly go wrong.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the concerns that you had?
Well, I personally had no concerns. Like,
mm-hmm.
because I do lots of meditating and visualizing, and so I basically visualized this birth, and it happened exactly how I'd visualized it when it happened. But I'd visualized it, and so I felt and knew in myself that everything would be fine. But my partner, he had worries about it. You know, what happens if the cord's around the baby's neck, or what happens if the placenta gets stuck, or what happens if they come out and they're not breathing? And so we did heaps and heaps of research, and by the end of it, he became obsessed with like researching into the placenta, funnily enough, which he thought it was incredible because the placenta acts as a resuscitation unit, and it feeds oxygen to the baby. And yeah, so we found out so much. Like, not even I knew that birth and the female body and you know, like the things like the placenta and just the hormones and everything, like I knew little bits, but when you actually go deep into it, you realize that nature just had everything there for you to just birth the way you should. And
your partner sounded like empowered and excited, and you sounded powerful and calm.
Yeah. So I was really calm, and I was dead set on it. And then, yeah, he did research, and he ended up going, yeah, this feels so right. It feels so normal. And, you know, he's ordering the birth pool and all this kind of stuff. So it was like, ended up being like really, really fun and a massive bonding experience for us as well. Because I think the first time, because of everything just happening, we were so disconnected from each other as well. Because he was all like, oh, but we're going to have a healthy baby. And I was like, yeah, but right now I'm mentally suffering. Whereas this time we were just like happy, and it just felt right. And so, yeah, with preparing for the free birth too, I did lots of birth visualizations, and I had done a visualization meditation, and basically the vision was that I would have a baby boy in the shower in our bathroom here at our house. And I spent so much time in that bathroom having baths and things throughout the pregnancy. So it was kind of funny that it all ended up that way. But I listened to the Free Birth podcast too, and your podcast had just started, I think, maybe a week or two before I had him, so I'd only got to listen to maybe one or two.
Yes, I had I had a whole, like, all these women were really excited, and there was like 1 or 2 weeks before they were going to have their babies, and I was like, I felt real pressured to get this out there. I was like, I have to get this out there for these women. So I tried to release, I think, 4 up front so you guys could binge listen. I'm glad you got to listen to at least one. And now you're on the podcast sharing your story, which is really cool.
Yeah. So funny. But I also watched, I'm not sure how much YouTube you watch at all, but there are a few Australian mums on there who had free births and put their free birth videos up as a way to, I guess, sort of normalize it and empower women to do the same.
Yes, I've come across heaps of Australian free births and some VBACs, and it's amazing.
Yeah, so like I binge watched over and over Natalie Alaska's free birth.
Oh, yep.
Ginty Fell's free birth, and then there's also the Ando family. They had a beautiful free birth video too. And like I also loved with all theirs that their toddlers were part of the birth, and because we had a toddler ourselves, it was like, yeah, I really want her to be part of it too.
It's good to see it, isn't it? You know how it happens, and the baby comes in, the baby goes out, the dad's holding the baby, you know, the friend comes in to help, and that from, you know, some of the videos I've seen. And it's good to get your partner to see that as well, so they can normalise and picture it in their mind as well, and normalise it as well.
Yeah, and like my toddler too, she became so obsessed with like all things birth, and she'd tell every single stranger on the street that we're having a home birth and the baby's gonna come out mum's bum. Like she knew everything that was going on. And yeah, if you gave her the choice of like watching, I don't know, Play School or Bluey or a birth video, she'd want to watch a birth video. So she was almost like a mini midwife or a mini doula, like the whole way through. And I think, yeah, it became even more special, especially closer to the end, because she'd be talking to my belly and be like, oh, you can come out now, baby. We've got our pool here for you. And it was really, really cute to just, you know, watch her grow and be part of this process as well, because I guess a lot of kids and babies and toddlers aren't part of birth. Like they're aware that there's a baby and the baby's going to come, but usually it's the parents leave, go to the hospital, have a baby, come back, and suddenly there's this baby. But with Edith, she was actually part of everything. So I guess I'll talk about the day I went into labour. Maybe I'd started losing my mucus plug about 3 weeks before I actually went into labour. It was just like small amounts at a time that had just happened, and I was having lots of practice waves, and you know, every single little thing that happened, I was like, this is it, this is going to happen, and then it stopped, because I'd never experienced that before, because with my first, I didn't even get any practice contractions or anything. And I think that was a lot to do with stress as well. My body wouldn't let me sort of surrender to the process.
How many days were you when you were starting to feel niggles?
I'd been feeling little things from, I think, about 35 weeks.
Okay.
But closer to 37, 38. Like I was almost convinced that I was going to have my baby at about 37 weeks. But and it just stopped. And then it would start again and it would stop. But then, yeah, the day I went into labour, I had a few little cramps in the morning, and then my sister and my little brother had invited me and Edith out into a local forest where heaps of people build cubbies. And so we went out and we spent the afternoon building cubbies, and I kept like joking to my sister, oh, you know, this is going to put me into labour. This is a perfect way to naturally induce me, you know, as a joke. And then by the time I got back to the car, I was just like, hang on a minute, this actually feels like something could be happening. And so then when I got home, which was about 4 in the afternoon, I started trying to make dinner, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And I went to the toilet, the rest of my plug came out, and then, you know, my partner got home at 5, and I was so excited, and I'm like, it's happening, this is going to happen tonight. And so we kind of just went through our normal daily routine of dinner, and we gave Edith a bath, and when we went to put her to bed, we do a little bit of yoga with her each night before bed, and I started trying to do the yoga with her, and it's like doing that yoga, my body just went, hey, you're in labour, it's going to start. And so happening, I was going up and down, and at about 8 p.m. I got into the bath, and I was sitting in the bath just, you know, talking to my baby and listening to some music and watching my uterus, well, my stomach contract. I don't know if you've ever kind of sat and observed, but it goes really pointy. And so I'm just like watching this happen in the bath. And then, yeah, by 11 p.m. I was in early labour, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try and sleep. I'm going to try and sleep as much as I can. But I think I ended up maybe sleeping for 20 minutes, and I was up getting a hot water bottle, and even just standing in the kitchen making that hot water bottle, I was having to kind of lean over the table and everything because it was so intense, but it was really intense in my back. And that's when I realized, he's posterior. And so I'd done quite a lot of belly mapping throughout the pregnancy. So immediately I could I could tell he was posterior. I knew the position he was in. I was like, all right, we'll go with this. Tried to get back into bed, and I let my partner sleep as much as possible. But by 1, I woke him up and I said, it's the baby's coming, and the baby's coming, because my contractions were so intense from that moment, and I never had the contractions a certain amount of time apart. They were just like all over the place. And so my partner, he got up and he was like so excited, and he runs down to the shed to get all the birth pool stuff, and he's setting it all up, and he's there going, okay, the way she's acting, the baby's going to be here any minute. And so he called we had 2 friends who were coming to help out. So yeah, Kathy, our friend, and Bella, and both of them happened to be in Melbourne at the time. So, they're getting a call at like 2 a.m. to, the baby's going to be coming soon. And so they drove all this way, which was 2 hours and almost 45 minutes for them to drive from Melbourne to our place. And they arrived, and I was in the pool already on all fours because I could not sit down or lean back at all due to that extra pressure on my back. Just was absolute killer. So I was on all fours the whole time. And yeah, my labor ended up, it was 20 hours of this active, intense labor. And I was so in and out of like my own little world the whole time. And it's actually really strange, but when I was in labor, all these weird little things that had happened to me in my life came back. Like I was having flashbacks to all these really hard and challenging things that I went through, like getting bullied in school, or when I went to visit my grandma, who was literally only hours away from passing away, to fights that I'd had with friends or family. Like there was just these weird flashbacks that kept happening. And I think it was like some weird emotional release thing that was happening. Like through this labor, I was letting go of so much of any past trauma that I've ever had. So the whole thing basically like healed my entire body really from all these really hard moments in my life. So I came out of it a completely different person. But
do you feel like you were hallucinating in a way? Like was it that kind of feeling, or a dream state, or hallucinating feeling, or something?
It was almost, it was more like a dream, I'd say. Yeah, it was so strange. But yeah, so that was happening, and basically because I'd been up with my daughter since 7 a.m. that day before, by the time that I actually had him, I'd been up for 46 hours straight with maybe like a 20-minute break in between. So I was really exhausted, and I can vividly remember myself almost like passing out in between contractions because of how tired I was, and I couldn't keep food down. I was really struggling to keep water down. And yeah, despite all of that, I still would do it again tomorrow. But yeah, so it was my friend Bella, she had to leave at 4 in the afternoon. So she was at 3:30, she's like, all right, I have to go now, but you're going to have your baby soon. Because in that moment I was going through that, I can't do it anymore. You know, the bit that they say happens before the baby comes.
Transition.
Yeah, well, I didn't end up having my baby until 9:24 that night. So he's like, oh, you're going to have your baby in the next 10 minutes after I leave. But no, that did not happen at all. So yeah, I was basically in the pool that we had set up, on the couch, on the floor, on the toilet, which I ended up spending, I think, most of my birth on the actual toilet. And so yeah, while I'm sitting on the toilet after our friend Bella left, Kati, our friend, was looking after Edith, and made sure that the pool was warm the whole time, because I really needed the support of Ricky, my partner. And so it's just like me and him sitting in the toilet. And anyway, I see him on his phone Googling something. And at this point, like, most of my labor, actually, I could hardly talk to anybody. Like, it was just a yes or a no, or if I wanted water or something, but I could not actually communicate properly. And so they'd be asking me things, and I was responding to them in my head, but I could not get the words out, which I found really hard with my daughter, because she was being so beautiful and they're saying, "Oh, it's okay, Mum," and she was patting me and, you know, putting warm water on my back, but I couldn't talk to her the whole way through my labor. And so that was a really wild experience as well, not being able to talk. Anyway, while I'm on the toilet, I see my partner Googling, and then suddenly he has a torch and he's like, "Oh, can I see how dilated you are?" And immediately I was just like, "No." And he was so shocked at how loud I was saying no to him. Like, I'd never seen him so scared in his life, really. But he was, because it had been so long, he was there thinking, like, are things actually happening? Is it like progressing? And then anyway, I ended up grabbing his hand, and I put his hand in between my legs, and immediately he's like, "Wow, like, there's something there, isn't there?" And yeah, I could feel my whole perineum and everything. It was just this swollen, huge, like almost like a balloon. And that's when I was like, okay, this baby's going to be coming really soon. And I suddenly felt this huge urge to get into the shower. So of course I'm communicating in the only way I could, "Shower now," kind of thing. And so, you know, I'm hobbling to the shower with my hand in between my legs, because it felt like everything was going to fall out.
Mm-hmm.
And I get into the shower, exactly how my visualization happened, and I'm in the corner of the shower, my partner's there, the water's on my back, because with posterior baby, a lot of the pain is more in your back
Mm-hmm.
than your front. So the shower was absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in the shower for, I think, maybe 45 minutes, and he was out. And basically I felt my waters break maybe a minute before his head actually came out. And so with that experience of the waters breaking, I describe it as when you have like a glass of lemonade and you put it down on a bench and all the bubbles go to the top. That was basically the feeling that I felt in my stomach when my waters broke. It was just this weird like bubble sensation. And so waters broke, and then suddenly there was this, I started crowning. And I'd been so nervous about the ring of fire that everyone talks about. Like, for some reason I was afraid that that was going to be the worst part of the labor. But
that's what some women say, and everyone has a different experience. Yeah.
For me, it felt absolutely amazing. Like, I'd almost describe that last bit where he was pushing himself out, because I was saying in my head, resist the urge to push, you know, let him do it, he'll do it. And of course he did, because that's how your body works.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just let everything happen naturally and how my body wanted it to happen. And it actually felt really good versus painful.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, suddenly there's this head out and my partner's there, like trying to turn the shower off. And as soon as the head was out, you know, I could hear he spat out mucus and he cried, even though his body was still inside. Like, it was super weird. So yeah, my partner quickly turned off the shower, and then I reckon there must have been like 10 seconds max between the head and the shoulders coming out, and he was just out. And then yeah, my partner caught our little boy, because at that moment I was holding myself up on the wall because I was having this crazy out of body experience. because yeah, like I said, I'm spiritual, I'm into meditation and all that. And so throughout the whole thing, I was visualizing a lot of like light going through my chakras and all this kind of stuff, which I'd read all about in an incredible book called Spirit Babies, because basically their view on it is that the baby's in like the spirit realm, and you as the mother are sort of the guide to bring the baby down to earth. And so, yeah, when he came out, I suddenly was above myself and I saw this huge beam of light just go through my crown chakra all the way down to my root chakra, which is where he was coming out. And so, yeah, I had to like hold myself up. I could not catch my own baby because I was just in this complete out of body, insane experience. And yeah, then my partner caught our baby and he says, "Oh, Maddie, you're right, it's a boy, it's a beautiful boy." And so we had him there in the shower, and it was absolutely perfect, but it was like quite a lot of, well, we thought it was a lot of blood because the shower water sort of made it you know, it dispersed a little bit in the shower, so it looked like there was a lot of blood, and his cord was quite short. So when my partner passed him up through my legs, the cord got caught around his arm, and we were a bit worried that we'd accidentally tugged on the cord. So we ended up calling the ambulance and get transferred to hospital. But of course, everything was absolutely perfectly fine. But as soon as you call the ambulance, I guess you're sort of in that medicalized thing. They were like, "Oh, you know, we've got to cut and clamp the cord." And from that moment, I was like, well, my placenta's not going to come out naturally. And sure enough, it didn't come out naturally. I ended up needing the injection in hospital. But because I'd had the birth that I wanted, I was totally fine with that. And even like my whitecoat syndrome, like I went in there feeling so calm about everything, and I was laughing and just obviously on this birth high. And it was actually even more crazy because the night that we had him and I went into hospital just happened to be the doctor that had caused all that trauma the first time. She was on that night.
Wow. Did she recognize you?
Yeah, she recognized me, and I had not spoken to her at all, and she'd received, I guess, this huge, deep letter from me. And so because I chose to ignore her trying to contact me, I just hoped in my head that she'd take the letter on board. And sure enough, she was a completely different doctor. Like, I'm not,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was just because it was me. I like to think that maybe she took my letter on board for all of her patients, but in the end, going to the hospital ended up being really, really healing too. And because I kind of got this confirmation that this doctor did take on what I said, and maybe she was making things more comfortable for other pregnant women. And she was asking me, you know, is it okay if I do this? And she was waiting for my consent before doing anything. And if I told her to stop, because it's pretty uncomfortable when you're getting the placenta sort of taken out. I'm not sure if, it's a super weird feeling. And because of the injection they give you, it just releases lots of synthetic hormones to make your uterus contract. And then there was a midwife pushing on my uterus while the doctor was sort of gently pulling the cord out.
Okay.
And the placenta. So it was a really weird feeling, but it got uncomfortable, and I said, "Can you please stop?" And she stopped immediately and was like, "Are you okay? Like, do you need some water? Do you need anything?" And so it was like the most beautiful hospital experience I've ever had as well.
Oh, that's so good. And how I get so teary when I listen to these stories. I think I say this every episode, but I literally do. I really do. It's not literal. How long did it take for the placenta to come out, you know, once you were in hospital and that sort of thing? Was it just an hour or two?
Well, the paramedic that showed up to take me to the hospital, she was actually quite, she was really open-minded, and so she understood that I really wanted to try and deliver the placenta naturally. So when we got to the hospital, she sort of advocated for me and said, "Look, she really wants to try get this placenta out on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hospital, surprisingly, like this really surprises me, they actually gave me 2 hours to try and get this placenta out on my own, which kind of, that's a long time for them to let something like that happen.
So you felt
and
really
they
supported.
were feeling on my tummy.
That's great.
Yeah, they were like touching my tummy, and they're like, look, we feel like most of it's detached, but we feel like there's a tiny little bit that's still attached, because they could get quite, like, they felt like it was close when they did gently tug on the cord, but there was just a little bit that was attached. And so, yeah, this paramedic, she was absolutely beautiful. She was like whispering in my ear and trying to make me kind of be calm. But I feel like because when we got to hospital, we got taken straight to the urgent care bit, because, you know, we came on an ambo, we had a baby at home, like it could be an emergency. And I wasn't given any privacy. So I feel like if I had have been given a bit more privacy, rather than like there was like 5 people around, because, you know, everyone was like, oh my God, you guys just had a baby. So all these nurses and midwives were like, wow, you've had a baby at home. And we're in a small town, so this never really happens ever, if it's ever happened.
Yeah, and when it does happen, it's like the woman's a champion, like hero.
Yeah,
when it happens, so you did this alone? You did this on your own?
Yeah. Everyone wanted to like meet us and see what was going on. And so there's me sitting on a birth stool trying to like get into my zone to, okay, you're going to deliver this placenta. But it just didn't happen, because I don't think I was given enough privacy.
Yeah,
and it was okay.
and I've done a bit of reading on this as well, with undisturbed birth, which is what you had at home, a very undisturbed birth. But then once, you know, you've got other people coming in asking questions, you know, lights on you, you're surrounded by people, your hormones changed, it's no longer undisturbed. And so to help the baby, you know, the placenta come out, you need to keep those hormones going, which is holding baby skin to skin, breastfeeding, which the hospital isn't, you know, the best space for it. So
no, and like they let me have the skin on skin, and, you know, he was suckling and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think because I didn't even have like a curtain around me, I was just in the middle of this room, like,
hello.
So it wasn't gonna happen. Like I knew that. And so
you were fine with it from the sound of it as well?
Yeah, I was completely fine with it. And because as well, like, it's always been on my bucket list to get taken to hospital in an ambo. So I was kind of like, oh, this is so cool. I get to like tick that off my bucket list too. I got to have an amazing birth, and I get an ambo ride. Like, so,
and it wasn't an emergency either. No.
So, in the end, they estimated that I'd only lost maybe 350 mil of blood.
Which is so minimal.
Yeah. So it was just because of the shower water that it looked like a lot. And like, if I was to have another baby again, at least now I'd know as well that, oh, hang on a minute, that's fine. Like, that amount of blood is fine. But at the same time, I was like, nah, it was all meant to happen this way, because now, like, I can drive past the hospital and I don't have this sinking feeling in my stomach, and I kind of look at it as, that was really, really nice getting to spend some time there. And a lot of the midwives that were on when we were in hospital after the C-section were there too, so it was kind of nice, like, getting to see them and to see how different they treated us, as, you know, we'd done this ourselves. We're obviously really powerful, and we know exactly what we wanted. And so it was just, it was a really, really beautiful experience at the hospital, which I never thought I would ever say.
And they got to see you as a beautiful butterfly.
In
your power and your glory, and, you know, beautiful.
Yeah, so it was, the most beautiful experience of my entire life, really. And I would seriously do it again tomorrow if I could.
That's beautiful. Oh, it sounds like such a beautiful experience. Thank you so much for sharing your birth stories with us, and your postpartum stories as well, and your pregnancy stories. You know, it's so nice to hear how happy you are and how healed you are as well after your experiences, and you're still on a birth high from the sound of it as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome awesome being able to just talk about it all, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Maddie. Hey, me again. I just wanted to let you know that I've just created a brand new Facebook group called VBAC Homebirth Support Group, where you can connect with other like-minded mothers who are looking to have a VBAC homebirth as well. You can find the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for listening to the VBAC Homebirth Stories podcast. I hope that this episode has helped you take another step to finding your voice and confidence in your VBAC journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more women to find out more about VBAC homebirth, just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at the Motherhood Circle. See you next week.